Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So, as I'm sure you can tell by the title of this episode, this is going to be an episode on Slate's awful, bad, no good, horrible, I have no freaking clue why the hell you would even run this piece in 2019, piece on Pete Buttigieg and his gayness. So before we get into the piece, though, I kind of want to explain a couple of things because, first off, the whole reason I wanted to make this episode is the piece just rubbed me the wrong way to begin with. I mean, just the whole premise of it really kind of pissed me off, and nothing in the piece made me feel any better about my initial assessment. But before we get into my thoughts on that, let's back up a little bit, just in case you don't know who Pete Buttigieg is. Pete Buttigieg, and that is apparently the correct pronunciation of his name. I looked it up on YouTube, so we're going to go with that. He is currently, right now, the 37-year-old mayor of South Bend, Indiana, which is best known for Notre Dame. He is their mayor. He is currently a 2020 Democratic presidential nominee. He is a Rhodes Scholar. He did serve in the Navy during Afghanistan, and he is openly gay. And he did come out as gay while serving his term as mayor of South Bend, and we'll kind of discuss that because it touches on that a bit in the piece. But basically the idea here behind this piece is that, is Buttigieg gay enough, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe this or any more charitable way to describe it? Yeah, so let me try to explain why this piece is so deeply annoying / really kind of wildly offensive if you know anything about the history of the LGBT community in this country. Now, obviously, this should be heralded as something of a big deal, and I actually went and looked it up. Buttigieg is actually not the first openly gay man to ever run for president, but he is the first openly gay Democratic candidate to ever run for president, and he is the first one to really be getting any kind of serious discussion / traction. And of course, like I said before, in the current Dem 2020 field, like, everybody and their mama's running. Numbers are all over the place. Like, I don't even know how to judge things right now, but over the past couple of weeks, Buttigieg has started to get a lot of press and a lot of attention. Some of it centered around his sexuality, some of it centered around his views. But here's my thing. And I'm going to try to back this up and try to explain things, because I think this might be kind of one of those things where growing up in a certain region of the country kind of colors your opinion on certain things. Like, I grew up in South Florida in the 80s and 90s, so obviously there was a very sizable gay community in South Florida, obviously, back then. And so I think maybe my views on this might be a bit different from other people's views on if you grew up places where there weren't as many gay people, or it wasn't as visible, or because there weren't as many visibly gay people, maybe like the issues of the gay community weren't something that you were really steeped in and grew up around. And I am so old, I remember when it was just the gay community. Like, I remember before it was the LGBT community, before it was the LGBTQ community, before it was the LGBTQIA+, or whatever the hell they're calling themselves nowadays. I remember when it was just the gay community. And I want to take a second to try to explain why exactly Buttigieg is something that should be celebrated in the gay community and just in society at large. Because if you went in a time machine and you went back 10 years, so you just 10 years, like, that's not a long time. If you went back to 2009 and you told people in the LGBT community that in 2019 there will be an openly gay, legally married man running for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States, people would look at you like you were fucking insane. they would say that's not going to happen in the next 10 years. Like maybe 20, 30 years out, sure, but in the next 10 years, that's insane. That's a pipe dream. Now, you get back in the Wayback Machine and you go back, say, 15, 20 years, and you tell people in the LGBT community that in the year 2019, there will be an openly gay, legally married man running for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. They would tell you that that is not something that's even going to happen in our lifetime. Like that would be like something that would be so far beyond the pale that you wouldn't even think to dream that such a thing would happen. Now, get back in the Wayback Machine and go back to the year I was born. Go back to 1981. If you tried to tell people back in 1981 that in 2019 there would be an openly gay, legally married man running for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States, they would not hear you. Because in 1981, things were vastly different for gay people in this country. That was the point where the gay community, where gay people, were lesbian people, were trans people, were really starting to try to break into the mainstream and try to show the world that they are just normal people with normal lives, normal aspirations, normal dreams, and that they're not any different from anybody else. And also in 1981, another thing happened to the gay community, and that is the first clinically documented cases of AIDS were on record. And in June of 1981 is when the CDC officially recognized that AIDS is a disease. So if you go back to 1981, this is not even on the radar, not even remotely close. In 1981, the LGBT community wasn't concerned about legal marriage or being able to be openly gay in politics or being able to run for president. They were concerned about surviving. They were concerned about AIDS. They were concerned about being able to be gay openly and not be beaten up for it, or to not be socially ostracized. So the fact that we have made it this far in 38 years is a huge fucking deal. And I'm not really here for anybody who's trying to shit on that accomplishment. It's huge. So trying to parse it in this little way of saying, well, is it enough? Yes, it is. If you know anything about the history of the gay community or the LGBT community, this is a big deal. And the fact that we got here this fast, which I know 38 years does not seem like a very fast amount of time, but when you think about it, that's like a blip that we've made it that far, that fast. So that is why the whole premise of this piece is just really kind of offensive to me, because it's so ignorant of the history of the LGBT community and everything that had to happen to get to this moment for Buttigieg to even exist in the world that he exists in. And I feel like, in a way, making these kinds of arguments about Buttigieg is really kind of shitting on all the work that every activist and every person who was courageous enough to be openly gay, to talk about the AIDS epidemic, to get us to this place where we can be here. You're just kind of like shitting on their work. Like I find it offensive. I really do. So with all that explained, let's go ahead and get into the piece itself. So the title of the piece is, In a Diverse Candidate Field, How is Pete Buttigieg's Sexuality Factoring into His Appeal? It's been 2 months since South Bend, Indiana Mayor Peter Buttigieg announced the formation of his Presidential Exploratory Committee, and the national profile of his fledgling candidacy has steadily risen. In the crowded Democratic field, the gay 37-year-old who entered the race with pretty much no name recognition claimed third place in a new Emerson poll of Iowa voters, behind Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. The poll puts Buttigieg in the same class as candidates who trailed him by only a few points, including Senators Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Cory Booker, all of whom, unlike Buttigieg, have held federal office and benefit from years of national press coverage. Okay, so he's on the come up. That's cool. Like, again, I think that kind of speaks to where we are at as a country, that an openly gay man running for the Democratic nomination for president is on the upswing. Like, that's a good thing. Like, it's I would feel very badly about the country if it were otherwise, if he was being denigrated because of his sexuality. So, moving on. Buttigieg's surprisingly strong performance in this poll and a recent flurry of flattering pieces on his Episcopalian faith, political philosophy, and potential electability have combined to create a real sense of momentum for the man now known as Mayor Pete. But with momentum comes backlash, currently in the form of frustration that the well-qualified female and black candidates in the race are getting shoved aside for another white guy. Okay, so you can already see where we're going with this, because apparently being female and being black, or being a black female, is higher up on the totem pole than being a gay white man. Apparently. So, anyway, when, for instance, economist Alan Cole tweeted on Sunday that Buttigieg seems heads and shoulders smarter than the other candidates running, a characteristic response, this one from writer Jill Philippic, was Warren, who taught at Harvard, was one of the most well-regarded law professors in the country and one of the most intelligent people to serve in the Senate, but we don't politically reward, let alone even identify, that kind of fierce intelligence in women. Shut the fuck up. Really? Really? We don't? Because I seem to remember a whole damn campaign where people kissed Hillary Clinton's ass because of her education and her experience. So don't try this shit. That's not your problem with Buttigieg. It's not that he's... I mean, actually, you know what? I'll take that back. It is kind of your problem with Buttigieg, that he's getting more shine than the women, or the black women, or the black man, or anybody else who you deem to be more oppressed than a gay white man. Anyway, moving on, back to the piece. This is going to be a long episode. Can already tell this already. But Buttigieg faces his own structural disadvantages in the race. Buttigieg is the first gay candidate in history, film journalist Mark Harris tweeted on Monday, which, like I said, he's actually not. The first one was Fred Kirchage. I'm sure I'm butchering his last name, but he was actually a Republican candidate. So, like I said, not the first gay candidate. I did not know that before I started doing the research for this episode. Moving back to the piece. So no, you don't get to use him, of all candidates, as the typical white guy the media always falls for. He doesn't deserve a free ride, but let me assure you, gay people in America aren't given free rides. No, they are not. And especially not gay men in politics. We'll elaborate more on that later, but yeah, this idea that somehow Buttigieg lives on Easy Street is fucking stupid. Anyway, these aren't just random tweets. The conversation is at the heart of a broader debate on the left about identity and representation. After Democrats failed to win what looked like an easy general election for the country's first major party female presidential nominee in 2016, some progressives worried that Democratic voters would be too spooked, or too sexist, to nominate a woman again. Maybe Dems would be safer, some wondered, with a nice progressive white guy. But for many liberals, a return to the old pattern of putting forward white men in the mold of the disproportionate majority of American politicians would be a capitulation to American voters' worst biases. In an era of rising white nationalism, escalating attacks on immigrants and reproductive justice, and a surge of women running for political office, a run-of-the-mill white male candidate doesn't seem like the right face for the future of the Democratic Party. Well, fortunately for you, Buttigieg isn't a typical run-of-the-mill white candidate running for the Democratic nomination. And even if he was straight, who gives a shit? Everybody gets to run, and whatever qualities you have, whatever pluses, whatever minuses, they are what they are. Like, why do we have to do this intersectional bullshit? Like, my God. Moving back to the piece. So, is Buttigieg a run-of-the-mill white male candidate, or does his sexuality set him apart? That mammoth question can be broken down into smaller ones that get at why diversity matters. Has Buttigieg faced setbacks or barriers to his success because he's gay? Well, I don't know. I guess the best person to ask would be Buttigieg. However, I don't imagine that being a gay man, serving in the military during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, was a super fun time. I imagine that presented some barriers and some problems. I imagine that having to come out as gay while you are a public elected official was not the easiest thing in the world to do. I imagine there was probably some cost involved with that, but he did it anyway because for reasons that we will get into when we get to that part of the piece. But do I imagine his life has been just wonderful because he's a white male? No. I don't know. I have no idea what his hardships have been. Nobody does. And even over and beyond anything that has anything to do with your identity as far as your race or your gender or your sexual orientation, that has no bearing on any kind of hurdles that you may have faced in your life, any kind of adversity that you've had to overcome. Everybody has their own story. And you can't parse it through these stupid, dumb little windows of race or gender or sexual orientation. That's so fucking stupid. Back to the piece. Does he have an identity-specific worldview that would inform his work much as, say, Harris's experiences as a black woman would inform hers? Okay, setting aside the Harris reference, because I do not want to make this a whole rant about Kamala and her experiences as a black woman, and how exactly do you parse that with her record as California AG? Would somebody like to explain that to me? Because it surely shit don't make no sense as far as intersectionality is concerned. But again, why would somebody's sexuality inform their worldview? It's just a part of who you are. But why would that be something that you would need to center as far as developing a worldview? Okay, you are sexually attracted to whoever you're sexually attracted to. It's a part of you, but there are much bigger parts of every individual human being other than who they like to have sex with. And that's really all sexuality is. It doesn't need to be anything bigger than that. It's just who you're attracted to sexually. It's not something you need to build a whole worldview around. At least not in my very logical estimation of building worldviews. I think there are a couple things that are a little more important to take into consideration. Would a win for Buttigieg be as historically significant and culturally meaningful as a win for the member of an underrepresented race or gender? Are you fucking kidding me? Do I really need to go into the history of gay men in politics in this country? And if you really want to pick an underrepresented group of people, there you go. Gay people in elected positions. I'm sorry, how many are there? Can you count them on two hands? Are you fucking kidding me with this question? Politics has never been a safe place for openly gay people. I mean, I'm so blown away by the whole concept of even asking a question like that. Yeah, politics, totally cool towards gay men. Gay men running have never had to deal with vile and vicious smear campaigns. Yeah, gay politicians have never been assassinated for being gay. I'm sure that's never happened. Are you... And this is something that annoys me about the younger generation. And I won't put it completely on millennials. I will say younger millennials, because I'm starting to parse this out into smaller and smaller pieces. But there is this idea that things that happened before you were born didn't happen. And it's no, there's a pretty ugly backstory in this country of what happens to openly gay people who run for political positions, who run for elected positions. And like I said off the rip, there has been a lot of work put in to get us to here, to where an openly gay man can run for elected office and not have to deal with just insane amounts of bullshit and threats on your life, being assassinated. Like, do they not know who Harvey Milk is? Have they never heard of this man? It's just like, I don't... And to say that, like, somehow women or black people are more underrepresented in electoral politics than gay people? Okay. You might want to run the numbers on that, folks. Anyway, moving back to the piece. None of these questions have definitive, satisfying answers. Yeah, they do. I just did it. For one thing, it's fruitless to argue over which marginalized identities are more or less marginalized. This kind of reductive, zero-sum appraisal of structural inequality is often and correctly derided as oppression Olympics. Okay, so you guys know how when I do these sorts of episodes, I always manage to, like, identify the spot in the piece where after the writer wrote a specific sentence or a specific paragraph, they should have really just closed down the laptop and went and did something else with the rest of their day. This is the part where she should have wrote, like, just close down the laptop, walk away, go do something else. Because the whole point of this article is Buttigieg gay enough to be somebody who should be vaunted over a black candidate or a female candidate or a black female candidate? You're engaging in the oppression Olympics. The whole fucking point of this piece is to engage in the oppression Olympics. You don't get to say that you're not doing something when you're clearly doing it. I know I make this point. I swear it feels like I make this point every time I do one of these episodes, but it's just this rhetorical feint that annoys the hell out of me. Just because you say that you're not doing something doesn't mean that you're not fucking doing it. Because you are. And just trying to couch it in this idea of, well, we shouldn't be doing this because this is stupid and we don't want to engage in the oppression Olympics. Well, then fucking delete this piece. Don't publish it. Because that's what you're doing. Like, just, oh my God. It annoys me. It annoys me every time I see it in a piece. Anyway, moving on. More importantly, no one identity ever stands on its own. Buttigieg isn't just gay. He's also white, male, upper class, Midwestern, married, Ivy League educated, and a man of faith. These other elements of Buttigieg's identity all contribute to the image voters are being asked to evaluate, and they've each shaped Buttigieg's life just as much as, if not more than, his sexuality. What? You mean somebody can be more than one thing at one time? And you mean a gay man can just be other things? A gay man can be married and from the Midwest? And my God, a man of faith? A gay man could be religious? Shut the fuck up! Wow! Nobody's ever heard of this before. Buttigieg must be some fucking unicorn. For what it's worth, that was sarcasm. Buttigieg isn't a unicorn. There are plenty of gay people out there, men and women, who, yes, live very normal lives. And that was the whole point of trying to mainstream the LGBT community in the 80s and 90s. All they wanted was to be seen as just normal, everyday people who do normal, everyday people shit. They have their lives, they have their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. The only thing that separates them from heterosexual people is who they're sexually attracted to. And that's it. So yes, Buttigieg is just a normal white dude. Okay, cool. That's the dream. That's all the community ever wanted, was just to be seen as normal fucking people. So yes, it's kind of a big deal. He's just normal. Cool. He's just a normal guy who went to college and graduated and was a Rhodes Scholar and served in the military, and now he's married, and now he's the mayor of a city, and now he's running to be Democratic nominee for president, and he's gay. Like, that was the goal. I don't understand what these young people think the goal was, but that was it. Moving back to the piece. That wouldn't necessarily be the case for a different gay candidate. All people get to choose, to some extent, how much or how little they embrace the cultural codes and paradigms of each facet of their identity. This is especially true for politicians who take great pains to massage their lives into electoral pleasing personas. But some components of identity are immutably visible. In a society built on exploitative hierarchies of race and gender, these features announce themselves before their bearer speaks a single word, permanently influencing public perception. Okay. Now we're getting to the part of the piece that really does piss me off. I'm sorry. Is Buttigieg not gay enough for you? Does he not display as gay enough for you? I'm sorry. What, did you want him to be fucking Big Gay Al? I mean, like, what? Everybody knows he's gay. He's said he's gay. He has a husband. How much more gay in public do you want him to be? Like, I don't get it. Like, what more do you want from this man? Like, what? Do you want him to just show up and saying, I'm super, thanks for asking? Like, okay, he's gay in the way that is best for him. And we all know he's gay. I don't see why he would need to belabor the point. I don't see why he would need to present as anything other than how he presents, because I'm assuming that the way he looks and the way he talks and the way he acts is the way he wants to fucking talk and look and act, because he's an individual and he gets to choose how he presents himself to the world. And it's not like he's trying to pretend like he's not gay or he's trying to hide it somehow. This is just, he's just a normal guy. Cool. Fine. That's whatever, dude. If you want to just look like a normal white dude, look like a normal white dude. If you want to sound like a normal white dude, just sound like a normal white dude. What more do the intersectionals want from this dude? I don't get it. But it gets worse. A marginalized sexual orientation can remain unspoken and unnoticed for as long as a queer person desires. A gay man who conforms to a critical mass of gendered expectations can move through life without his sexuality attending every interaction, even after he comes out. Buttigieg, for instance, would register on only the most finely tuned gaydar. Most people who are aware of his candidacy probably know he's gay, but his every appearance doesn't activate the, hey, that's the homosexual gentleman response in the average brain. That doesn't mean he's not gay enough. There's really no such measure. It just means that he might not be up against quite the same hurdles that a gay candidate without such sturdy ties to straight culture would be. Shut up. Stop it. Stop it right now. This man owes you nothing. He does not owe you to act in a certain way or to look a certain way or to be a certain way. He is as he wants to be. And I'm sorry if he doesn't trip everybody's fucking gaydar. So what? We all know he's gay. That's enough. It doesn't have to be something that has to be shoved down everybody's throat every time they see Buttigieg. Like, I don't get it. I really don't fucking get it. Like, this is what you're attacking this man for? Oh, he doesn't appear gay enough. And this little thing that, I'm not saying that he's not gay enough because you can't judge that. It's exactly what the fuck you're saying. Don't pretend like you're not saying what you're saying. That annoys the hell out of me in every one of these damn pieces. It's like, do they learn this in some kind of intersectional woke school to basically try to say like, oh, if I say I'm not doing what I'm doing, then people will notice that I'm not doing what I'm doing? Like, oh my God, just this man doesn't owe you anything. He just is. He's gay. Everybody knows he's gay. I don't know what else you want this man to do to display his gayness. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. From what I've seen, Buttigieg doesn't seem terribly sold on the idea of gayness as a cultural framework, formative identity, or anything more than a category of sexual and romantic behavior. When he came out in a 2015 essay, 4 years into his tenure as mayor, it was with some reluctance. I'm not used to viewing this as anybody else's business, he wrote. Being gay has had no bearing on my job performance in business, in the military, or in my current role as mayor. According to the essay, Buttigieg only decided to reveal his sexual orientation to the world because he wanted to start dating. Like most people, I would like to get married one day and eventually raise a family. I came out because I had to, he wrote. He hoped his coming out would help destigmatize homosexuality in Indiana, but expressed excitement for an inevitable future in which children will be puzzled that somebody like me revealing he is gay was even considered to be newsworthy. Yes, one's sexual orientation is simply about who one wishes to have sex with. It doesn't have to be some kind of cultural framework or formative identity or anything more than a category of sexual and romantic behavior. And for what it's worth, this story does link to the 2015 essay. I will put the link to the 2015 essay down in the show notes because it is, in its own way, kind of sweet and kind of poignant and kind of what you would really want like a modern coming out essay to look like, because it's just very like matter of fact. It's like, okay, I've done all these things. Me being gay has had no bearing on my life or my professional capacities, but here it is. I'm the mayor of a city. I would like to start dating. I would like to find somebody to get married with. And for what it's worth, he actually wrote this essay before the Supreme Court decision. It was right before, I think it was just a couple months before the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage. So when he was writing it, it wasn't entirely determined that his dream of getting married and starting a family would ever be something that he could legally do. But yeah, it just is, his coming out essay speaks to this idea that gay people are just like straight people and you want the same things in your life. And so obviously as a public figure, if you're going to start dating, like you're single, you're starting to date, and you're a guy and you're gay, instead of having people speculate on your sexual orientation and gossiping and is he or isn't he or whatever, I can respect just coming out and saying, you know what, I'm gay. All right, I'm gay. That way we don't have to talk about it. And yes, I won't be dating people because I would like to find somebody to marry, which he did actually get married last year. So he was successful in that attempt. So, but yeah, it's just like, that's really all it should be. It's really all it needs to be. Like, it doesn't need to be this insane, long, flowery thing where there's navel gazing and making political statements. It can just be saying, yeah, I'm gay. And that's about it. So, moving back to the piece. These are the remarks of someone whose affiliation with the gay community only goes so far as his own gay relationships, who can seemingly only conceive of homosexuality as a value neutral or negative, certainly not positive, aside in a person's biography. It is also possible that Buttigieg, as a politician, believes this is the safest way to characterize his homosexuality. Or he just doesn't center homosexuality in the center of his fucking existence. Most people don't center their sexuality in the center of their existence because that's weird and kind of creepy. Like, why would that be the thing that needs to be the center of your existence? Like, if Buttigieg was straight and he felt the need to bring up on a regular basis, I'm straight. I love the ladies so much. So many ladies, so great. Love ladies. We'd all be like, dude, okay, cool. We got the memo the first time. And it should be that way for gay people. Like, okay, you came out, you wrote an essay, you're gay, cool, whatever. Like, you don't need to keep harping on the point. But apparently, for the intersectional crowd, you have to keep harping on the point to the point where that becomes the integral part of your identity. Like, that becomes the center of your existence. And that's just a really weird way of viewing existence. Like I said, sexuality is a part of everybody. Like, everybody has their own sexual orientation. But it's not something that most of us use to just, like, inform our lives on a day-to-day basis. Like, it's just... It's just asking such a weird thing of this man that you really have no business asking him. Anyway, we're gonna make it through this piece, I promise. Another queer politician might have explained how being a member of a marginalized group has informed his understanding of political and structural discrimination, or how conservative politicians contributed to the long struggle that preceded his acceptance of his own sexuality, or how witnessing homophobia in the military, something Buttigieg has obliquely mentioned, affected his self-image and performance in the Navy. But Buttigieg suggests that being gay has had no bearing at all on anything else he's done in his life. There's nothing objectively wrong with such an assimilationist perspective, especially for a newly out man who seems ready to lead on trans rights and other LGBTQ political issues. But it does make him less exciting as a supposedly gay trailblazer someone the left desperately want him to be. Again, why? Why is... I genuinely don't get it. Like, just because the dude is not being gay in the way you want him to be gay doesn't mean you get to, like, make demands of this dude or critique how he is being gay. He's living his life the way he wants to live his life. Like, back the fuck up. Oh my god. Anyway, to me, a queer woman, it seems hard to argue that the presidential run of this hypothesis of respectable politics is a major win for diversity. Buttigieg's perception of queer sexuality as a not sinful but ultimately unimportant distinction, like having brown hair, his coming out essay said, doesn't make him less gay. It does, however, put some distance between him and the queer communities he's getting credit for being the first to represent. And if I'm being cynical, or just honest, it probably makes him more electable. See, this is where we come to the crux of the difference between, I think, certain generations, and obviously this is where you're starting to see the divide between somebody like Buttigieg, who is in his mid-ish 30s, and somebody who's probably in their mid-ish 20s, or late 20s. Yeah, see, here's the thing. The whole point, like I said, of trying to mainstream gay people was the idea that they're not different. That being gay doesn't make you a special snowflake. It just makes you, like, slightly different than your neighbor. Assuming that your neighbor isn't also gay. But it's not this great big to-do thing that's like, I am gay and therefore I am special and wonderful and unique and it's something that makes me just so fucking special. No, it's not. And honestly, I come down on the side of Buttigieg on this, obviously, in that your sexuality isn't any different than your hair color or your skin color or your gender or whatever the hell else you were born with. It's just a thing that you were born with. It's not an accomplishment. It's not something to wave around in the air any more so than being white or being black or being brown or being Asian or being whatever, or having whatever hair color, eye color, whatever physical endowments you may have been born with. It's what you're born with. Like, it doesn't make you special. And it shouldn't make you special. It's just a thing. Like, it's not something that you have to wave around and try to make like you're special. Because it's never what the gay community wanted. The whole point was that people would stop looking at them like they were different. They just want to be seen as the same, just as people who happen to like to have sex with people of the same gender. That they're not different. That was the whole point. And I think that is really where this comes down, is there is a generational divide between how different generations were brought up to see being gay. And this, I think, is also where you get a lot of people that do buy into intersectionality and thinking that these sorts of things that you were born with somehow make you special. And those of us who are older know that no, they don't. It doesn't really make all that much of a difference. But let's go ahead and finish out this piece. Straight white male voters will likely find it easier to see themselves in Buttigieg than in the women or people of color in the 2020 field. They'll be right to do so. Buttigieg's life experiences, how he's been perceived, how he's gotten paid, what he's believed himself capable of, what opportunities have been available to him, almost certainly have far more in common with those of Sanders or Biden than those of Harris, Booker, and Warren. That's not to say he won't face challenges and stereotypes specific to his sexuality, or that he hasn't overcome obstacles that he's chosen not to share. What? You mean maybe he's not a total fucking oversharer like everybody else? Maybe he likes to keep his own personal business to himself? You don't say! Homophobia still exists. As Buttigieg has correctly pointed out in town halls and interviews, LGBTQ people can still legally be fired for the mere fact of their identity in most U.S. states. But in a primary for the overwhelmingly pro-gay Democratic Party, Buttigieg can be more accurately lumped in with his white male peers than with anybody else. So, that concludes the piece. Yeah, what is interesting about something that is happening in the Dem 2020 field, and you're kind of starting to see it with Biden too. There was another piece that dropped this week about creepy Uncle Joe being creepy Uncle Joe. But it's this idea that you have to, well, not you. Let me back that up. And when I say you, I mean like the royal you. I mean, there's a certain section of the woke who feel the need to tear down anybody who doesn't meet their criteria of what a candidate should be. And I don't know who the hell they're going to end up backing, because nobody is going to meet the standards they're putting forth. I mean, this is an openly gay man running for the nomination, and apparently because he's white and doesn't present as a flaming queer, he's not good enough. He gets lumped in with all the other straight white men, even though he's not a straight white man. He's a gay white man. I don't... The hierarchy is so weird, and this is going to get so ugly and vicious and backstabbing and just ugly. Like this, the Dem 2020 season is going to get very ugly for the intersectionals. And like I said, nobody's going to meet their standards. Nobody's going to measure up. So it's going to be very interesting to watch what happens to this group of people when they start to realize that their unicorn doesn't exist. And you're going to have to coalesce around somebody, and you're going to have to like choke it down and accept that there are going to be parts of your candidate that you don't like. Just like every fucking other group of people does every time you have to back a political candidate. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But yeah, this is not the only example I've seen of people trying to attack Buttigieg for not being quote unquote gay enough. And like I said at the beginning, I find the concept deeply offensive, because you're trying to police how another person is living their life and telling them that they're not doing it right, and you need to be doing it more this way and not that way. And I'm assuming that Mayor Pete lives his life the way he wants to live it, in the way that he is most comfortable in expressing himself and his sexuality. And you know what? If you don't like it, fuck off. You don't get to tell somebody else how to live their life. Like, that's really offensive. And it's really rude. And it's so entitled and so presumptuous to even try to attack this man on this level, that it's just like, it deserves to be called out. It needs to be called out. And so, there we go. I called it out. So, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up on that note. If you did make it this far, thank you as always. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.